Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. If you love and support the work that we do, head to www.sexedwithdb.com and buy some of our hot new merch. Follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast. And if you want to advertise with us, shoot us an email at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. You are all in for a treat with today's episode, featuring Louie Ortiz-Fonseca. Louie is the director of LGBTQ health and rights at Advocates for Youth, an organization that works alongside thousands of young people here in the US and around the globe as they fight for sexual health, rights, and justice. Louie works in partnership with young people living with HIV to combat stigma, and he hosts a YouTube series for LGBTQ youth called Kikis with Louie. Louie is also the creator of the Gran Varones, a digital storytelling project that amplifies queer history. Find out more about Advocates for Youth at www.advocatesforyouth.org. Here I am with Louie. Fun fact number 1. Did you know that Uberlube works underwater, making it great for fun in pools, lakes, and tubs? Fun fact number 2. Uberlube is latex compatible, so it's safe and effective to use with condoms. And fun fact number 3. A small amount of Uberlube can be applied anywhere to prevent daily chafing, not just when exercising. These fun facts are brought to you by Uberlube. Use promo code SEXEDDB for 10% off your purchase with free shipping at www.uberlube.com. Ever wish you had an exact replica of your gorgeous parts? Well, now you can make one yourself thanks to Clone-A-Willy. Clone-A-Willy and Clone-A-Pussy are DIY molding kits that allow anyone to make an exact replica of any penis or vulva at home into a high-quality sex toy or memento. Use promo code SEXED20 for 20% off your purchase at www.cloneawilly.com. Follow them on Instagram at Clone-A-Willy-Kit. Hello, Louie. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. It is our pleasure. Let's get started by you sharing your name, your pronouns, and what you do.
Louie Ortiz-Fonseca, he, him, his. I work with Advocates for Youth, which is generally the overarching thing. We're a sexual reproductive justice organization, do a lot of work around sex ed and working with young people and agencies throughout the country. So I do a lot of LGBTQ and HIV work, and also do storytelling outside of that as creator of the Gran Varones project.
Love it. Thank you so much for that background. Talk a little bit more about Advocates for Youth and what you all do there on the ground.
Well, we do several things on the ground. I think it's definitely my first job on the national spectrum of the landscape. I did a lot of work in Philadelphia for about 20 years. I'm working at local nonprofits. So Advocates for Youth, our primary goal is to ensure that young people have access to affirming, non-judgmental, and factual sex ed. So a lot of that is done through either local or state national organizing, working with school districts to make sure that they have curriculum that is affirming and factual, right? And that, doesn't make young people feel judged, particularly those who identify as LGBTQ. And then we work with policymakers. But a lot of this work that we do is driven by the young people we work with all over the country. And one of the ways we do that is that we have several youth activist cohorts. I have one. ECHO, Engaging Communities Around HIV Organizing. It's a collective of young people living with HIV who do a lot of work. So we do stuff that, that's around culture shift, policy shift, but also things that impact policy at the local and school level.
Incredible. And I think what you said about the cohorts of young people that you work with is so important to center young people, because if you're making policy, making sex ed relevant to young people, then you have to involve them, right? You have to put them at the center. And I think that's exactly what Advocates for Youth is doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've always worked with young people. And I think the reason why part of the reason why our work is powerful is because we are challenged by our young people, right? We can come up with a great idea and think that this tactic or strategy is perfect, and then we present it to the young people because we never put anything out that's outward facing or any strategy without checking in with our young people. And sometimes you're going to get pushback and you're going to be reminded that maybe this strategy is dated or that something needs to be added or needs to be tweaked. So like, I think because we are challenged in that and make that part of our work, I think that gives us a different kind of approach and a different kind of perspective.
Yeah, fresher, I would say. More in tune with what young people are actually thinking and feeling and want, which is great. So I first learned about you from Kikis with Louie, and this series is so fantastic. You've had so many amazing LGBTQ plus guests on, and some are super, super well known, like MJ Rodriguez from Pose. Can you tell me about how that project originated and what's its goal?
This project can literally have its own documentary. But the short story is, we were presented with an idea to maybe do something, a campaign. It wasn't necessarily a video or a YouTube campaign a year prior. And we weren't sure what we wanted to do or what we could do that we hadn't done already. So it took some time to figure that out. And then there was a day, I think it might have been a Friday, where we got a call, and it was like kind of like those things that like wait but hurry up.
Right. Hurry
So
up
we
and
waited,
wait.
and then
Exactly.
yeah, hurry up and wait. So that Friday we had like an hour. We were presented with an idea that was completely awful. Like it was awful. And I was like, I'm not doing this. You know what I mean? Like, I do not like the idea. I'm not a capitalist in that way that I'm going to do it because it may be more opportunity. It's kind of like, I already know it's not going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, so after some tweaks, I gave staff, I said, if you can come up with an idea in 5 minutes, because I'm leaving, right? Then I'll do it. But so I'm going to put the trust in y'all. I'm not going to lead this project as part of it was what I wanted to be fun, where it wasn't a project that I led, because that comes with different kinds of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 minutes later, they presented the idea, and I was amazed. And we said, let's go for it. And we traveled to 7 different cities and interviewed tons of folks,
Wow.
like MJ Rodriguez. And in every city, we interviewed young people.
Amazing. Wow. 5 minutes, huh? That's all it takes for this genius idea.
Sometimes, people are under pressure, like, because it was clear, because we had to make a decision quick. Either we were going to partner with MAC, because I forget that's where it originated from.
Right.
MAC Cosmetics, or it was going to be a no. So like the answer had to be that day
Quick.
by 5 o'clock.
Right.
Yeah.
And it worked out. That's so incredible. And what about its goal? So obviously, you traveling all over the country in 7 different cities, you're talking to famous people, you're talking to people who aren't famous, who are regular LGBTQ people. Like, what was its goal, and what do you think that people watching get out of it?
So I think one goal was definitely to enter the YouTube sphere. I have a 17-year-old son who only listens to music on YouTube. I never know what the hell he's listening to. It's presented an opportunity to have tons of conversations around sex ed because of what he listens to. So it was like, it was going to be really different for Advocates for Youth, right? And we knew that we wanted to center young people. And I love storytelling. I love story of self. And I think a lot of times with young people and around sex ed and LGBTQ issues and self-esteem, that's done a lot through campaigns. And while that work is powerful, it was like, what can we create that will have young people tell their stories or hear their stories through influencers that they love and respect and, adore. Mm-hmm. So that was our goal, to like center the stories of young people and just have me be kind of the facilitator. That's why I love this project, because it's not so much of what I think and what I feel as much as me being the trusted adult during these conversations. So it was just kind of like, providing us an opportunity to interrupt a lot of the homophobia that is in the YouTube space, but also create a project where young people are hearing what they're experiencing from other young people. And I believe in legacy work, right? So while we can post a story today and someone will discover it 4 years from now and connect not only to the people on the screen telling their stories, but in the comments. So we were like really intentional about like, what do we want to create that would last forever? And that was Kikis.
Amazing. Yeah. And could you maybe talk a little bit about the history behind Kikis and like what that means to the queer community?
I think generally it's kind of like having a good time, like let's have a Kiki. It's more than a party. It's kind of like a community, right? I've also, used it as a young person many, many years ago. Something that like it was an inside joke, but it was something that was experienced within community. So it's part conversation, part celebration, part pain, right? So it's this immersive experience, for lack of a better term. Let's have a Kiki. So that means like we're going to talk about everything, and I think if I were to compare it now, it would be kind of like I think what podcasts are. Right, because you're going to laugh, you're going to joke, you're going to talk about pop culture.
You're going to get into it.
Yes, right. So that's what Kiki is for folks who may have not heard the term before.
Perfect. And so you talked about a little bit Gran Varones. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a digital project that highlights community storytelling and queer pop culture history. Some of the things it seems like you're super passionate about and are able to combine many times, which is amazing in your career. Tell me more about that, and what is that project?
So I'm born and raised in Philadelphia, and like many cities, Philadelphia is racially segregated, right? So I grew up there, and as Puerto Rican, it was hard to figure out where one belonged because there was such these cultural and racial divides that were really, really real. And I, was able to navigate that, and then I met my best friend 7 years ago when he moved to another Puerto Rican who moved to Philadelphia from Lancaster, which is Lancaster, PA. It's not Puerto Rican, right? But it's a lot of Amish folk, right? The Amish culture is very prominent there. So when he came to Philadelphia, he was like, "So where are the Latino gay clubs?" And I was like, "That's not a thing here." And for somebody coming from where he was, he like Philadelphia was supposed to be like the other New York,
right?
So he's like, "This is weird." And I was like, "Yeah, it's always been like that. I'm not sure what is or what isn't." So then we came up and said, "Well, why don't we go find them?" Because we know that the locals and the queer, gay, Latino gays are out there, but we didn't have resources. We didn't have a place for people to meet because we know that people would not want to meet in person. Because people always say we need spaces, and then you create a space, and then nobody wants to go to that space, right?
Why do you think that is? Is that like, does that have to do with like embarrassment or just kind of like other things coming up, or?
I think it's kind of like, when maybe you've been to a conference or maybe outside of the city, or there's that one night where you wind up at a place with like-minded people and you're like, "Oh my God, I needed this tonight." Right? We should do this again. But the part of what made it magical was that you didn't know that you needed it. It was provided for you.
Right.
And it's hard to say, let's do it every Friday, because do I need that today? And I think that's why, because I've done it. I've said we need to do this again. And then I'm like, I really don't want to do this today. Right? Not because I no longer need it. It's just the way I've entered it in that kind of way is just different.
Right.
Right. So we didn't want to do that. Right. So we said, well, let's take photos and we'll create something like Humans of New York, which was huge like 7 years ago. It's still a thing. And so we'll get stories, and that way you get to meet people since you just moved here, and I'll photograph them and ask people, and then we will see what that looks like. And eventually it turned into it transitioned from a photography project of people telling their stories to then talking about pop culture history. So essentially, it's like just building community in the virtual space.
Love it. And how long has that project been going on?
We turned 6 this past May.
Oh my gosh, happy
It's
belated.
yeah, thank you. It's wild, I think, and like Kikis, you know, Kikis is magical because, as I said, like every city we went to, we interviewed a group of young people. Right? It didn't matter. We could have interviewed Mariah Carey. That would have been a dream of mine. But like, and I actually did see her while we were recording in Vegas.
Oh my God.
Um, so we interviewed a group of young people because it was important for us to make sure that we centered those voices as much as we centered influencers, right? So part of that is relinquishing power. Like none of this is going to work without this community. And Gravarones is the same way because we don't pay for stories. So people have to trust the project in order to share their stories, right? So like it's this like, I know that this will not work without y'all. It can be scary in the beginning, but once you believe in community and know the power of community, magic happens. And I think that's a lot of why Gravarones has been able to grow. And I would say that part of the pop culture music history component was a suggestion by a follower.
Oh, wow.
Who followed me on my personal page, and I was doing a lot of music history there. And she was like, I got a question, like, why don't you do this on Gravarones? And I was like, well, I don't know, because it's about music history. I don't know if people would connect. She was like, your project is named after a song. And I was like, oh, that's right.
That's true. Well, that's amazing that you kind of took that advice from someone who followed your work and they were able to like participate in a really big way in your community. So that's really like lovely and warm. So obviously there's a really clear theme here, right? In all your work, there's storytelling, there's art, there's digital media to really create community, as you're speaking about, and positive change in the LGBTQ community. Why do you think these themes are such a strong part of your work? What is your background, in terms of how those things became so prominent for you?
I actually just had a conversation with a friend of mine last night via DM because no one talks on the phone anymore. Trying to like dig deeper into why I do storytelling. I love it. I think that it's part of who I am. But like, kind of like how can I be more intentional about it? Right? Because if it's community storytelling, like how do I be more careful or more intentional or more tender with what I share and what I put out there? Because it's consumed by people who historically and politically have gone through pain, right? But I think that what I'm coming up with is, as a kid, I was, always hung with my mother. She always had queer and trans folks in the house. And I think because I'm newsy as hell, I would like try to hang around to listen to their stories and trying to decipher what they said, because a lot of the language I didn't know, but I knew what they probably was alluding to, even though I didn't really know what that exactly was.
Right.
Right. So I was like, I know what they're saying. That means something happened. So I think that because
it's like a lot
I
of
was
decoding.
Always, yes, and I love that as a kid. So I would like hide behind the couch just to listen. I don't even know. I wasn't going to do anything with the information, but me knowing it and deciphering it and filling in the pieces,
right,
always captivated me. And a lot of times there was always music playing in the background, so I would hear their commentary about like Irene Cara, Cyndi Lauper, Madonna. So I think that that's why storytelling and music are so linked to me. Like I remember things in music. I remember things in pop culture. And I think that's why I love the work. And I think that's why Kikis and Gravarones were great artistic experiences for me, because people are telling their stories through pop culture. Because I believe that, what we hear and what we see are the soundtracks of our lives. And I think there's not enough conversation about it. We hear that Lady Gaga, we read enough about Lady Gaga being a queer artist, but I think it's more deeper than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is like, and 20 years from now, we're going to have conversations about the music of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to be Black, Latinx, queer, and trans during COVID in the music, right? So I'm excited to read about that. So I think because of that, that's what, that's the work I love to do because it comes so naturally. And I think that's embedded through all of my stuff. So like, I don't think I can ever get away from it.
I love that though. I mean, if it makes you happy and makes you feel full and makes you feel connected to people and really able to invite them in, I think that's really beautiful. Who are some of your favorite queer artists?
My favorite queer artist. I don't know if I can, because I'm a Mariah Lamb. um, and I know that people have thoughts about RuPaul, right? And I
Very
have similar
contentious
thoughts,
these
right?
days. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as an elder, I'm trying to be more comfortable and intentional about me being an elder, although I still feel 23. But I'm saying that, what I say and what I don't say to people who may see me as a mentor has huge impacts, regardless if I think we're on the same level. We're not
Mm-hmm.
in some spaces and in some roles. I'm trying to be really cognizant of that. So I think that how I experience RuPaul is kind of like, that's just my older, that's my uncle. Like, he's really cool though, but we still figuring stuff out. Like, the world changed too fast,
Right.
right? But like, I think I do love RuPaul, because of what he represented for me as a kid,
Yeah.
right? I can distinctively remember, and I've shared this story on Gravadones, like the first time that I saw Supermodel on TV, we were getting raided by the police.
Mm.
And, I was on the floor, my mother was on the floor, face down, video vibrations on BET was on. So this had to be like after 3 o'clock because it came on at 3 o'clock. And we have guns pointed to our head. And I don't remember us being terrified because that was something that was kind of like the norm, during those years, because as the war on drugs intensified. So somebody's house on the block was always getting raided, right? Like, it was kind of like, here these go again. And I remember RuPaul's like Supermodel video on, and me looking up, and my mother looking up, and me deciphering what I was seeing, right? Because it could be hard for some people. Like, there was really no queer representation, at least controlled by queer people
Mm.
during that time. And definitely in music, on Black television. So it was like, okay, there's something going on here, and there's a lot going on in this room.
Right.
But I was so
You were
in
mesmerized.
awe. Yes, it was like, okay. And I remember my mother saying, "Is that a drag queen?" And me going, I think so. And I remember the cop looking and saying, "I think so." So it was this really weird,
Like a full conversation was happening.
yeah, like, while this immense violence is happening,
Yeah.
right? So like,
Wow.
that was my entry into RuPaul. So like, I think that, so I've always experienced that story or that reality or that happening as like the universe saying, you are going to be all right. We got you.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's like, because it could have been any video, that TV could have been on any station.
Right.
And it's like, do not get lost in what is happening right here, because, so I think that's why my connection to RuPaul is, because, he saved my life that day. And I was able to still stay connected to my mother. Like, we were able to talk about this, even though we were going through this dehumanizing experience. Me and my mother shared this. So I'm still unpacking that experience, right? Um, but
Very,
I think,
very complicated memory as we
yeah,
both are crying.
that's why, I love RuPaul, right? That's not to say I do not have feedback or thoughts about a lot
Of
of stuff.
course.
I have feedback, thoughts about myself. But I think that if I had to choose someone, like emotionally and spiritually, it would have to be like RuPaul.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing that really, really challenging and really complicated memory with me. I think that is really, really obviously very intense and a lot of things to think about there. But the fact that you did feel like held in that moment and like supported by this person on your TV and were able to escape that moment for a little is really powerful. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. Um, I would love to hear what topics or issues do you think are affecting queer youth that are maybe most misunderstood and that you wish that non-queer people and allies knew about young queer people?
Oh my God, I think my answer would have been slightly different in um, March 12th,
Uh-huh.
before the collapse of the New World. Um, I think a lot of what gets discounted by non queer people is the need for visibility and to be heard,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, we live in the age of intense social media. We live in an age where people can post selfies and tell their stories, but a lot of queer young people are not able to do that safely, or they're still doing that in secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just had our annual youth conference in the virtual, we had to do it virtually. We usually do it in person. And one thing we had to contend with is, you know, it was like, well, do all of our youth activists have access to Wi-Fi?
Mm-hmm.
Check. Do they have access to computers or devices? Check. Do they have access to spaces where they can be themselves and participate fully?
Not sure.
And it was like, not sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even while, you know, the access to the participate to the conference is wider now because people do not have to fly out, right, or take off school necessarily. They can be in their own space. They have more agency about how and when they can participate.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, oh, but like even if someone wanted to participate fully, they may not be able to share a story, share an experience, depending on who's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now during this time, that's even more important, especially when people are isolated and want to connect. And as a storyteller, you know, there are many nights where I've shared something either on Twitter, on Instagram, that I just needed to get out of my head,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that I could get sleep or move to the next thing I need to do, like clean my kitchen. Um, and I don't know if, and I'm privileged in that way. I can do that because I get to say what happens in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are a lot of queer stories that are not being told completely and fully because people don't have that luxury of filling space in the space that they are now, with this large assumption that if you are quarantined, then you are keeping yourself safer. What does safer mean?
Mm.
Right? And it's complicated just by because people are living and breathing and wanting and hoping to be who they are.
Mm.
And I think for some folks, this can sound like something that we've kind of addressed in 1998, right? Like, right, well, we're still here. And it's like, yes, I think we've always been here, right? I
Right.
just think that now it's more amplified. So my hope is that, you know, any adult out there who may be listening, who may have not considered what they think or what they say out loud in front of their young people, the implications it may have and how that young person shows up in the virtual space in their community that they're hoping to build.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring it back to Kikis, the one thing I love, another thing I love about Kikis, as I said, you know, I'm the adult in the room. And I like to think that, or I hope that I'm modeling what those conversations can be for parents, having, or guardians or caretakers or mentors of young people. A lot of what our young people or the children we love are going to tell us, it is going to be hard to hear and it can be awkward. right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can be there and we can listen. So I hope that adults and parents who are watching Kikis, get that it's possible. It can be hard. It can be tough. We may want to jump in and fix it. So I hope that people get that and understand just how critical it even is now in this time of COVID.
Yes, absolutely. We have one more question. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for being on. And the question is, what projects do you envision creating in the future? Where do you see yourself continuing the storytelling in the next 5, 10 plus years, whether that be with advocates or on your own kind of path of projects?
Great question.
Was that too much pressure?
No, because I think I'm hoping that Kiki's would, I guess, transition into a podcast.
Love it.
I'm not particularly, what was tough about Kiki's was that I had to be in front of the camera. So a lot of times when I watch certain episodes, I can see how tense I am. Right, because part of it, I think I was hyper aware of making sure that I wasn't coming across as a caricature, even though I am loud and I may be stereotypically your gay uncle or your gay mom's best friend, right? In the YouTube space, those things have different contexts and implications, right? So I was thinking, I don't want to become a meme or a GIF, right? Or to be a distraction. I was thinking like very 80s, right? Like, if you want to sell records, don't be too gay, George Michael. So I'm hoping that, Kiki's would transition into a podcast, and that's professionally. And I think personally, where I would love to take storytelling is into the podcast realm, but through music. I'd rather, I love Gravadones and I love advocates. I'm able to talk about political things. I'm able to, connect my experiences to issues, and I just want to talk about the music I loved as a kid, right? Through those experiences versus talking about my experiences through music, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see.
We will see, and I can't wait to hopefully listen to the podcast and, listen to both your podcasts whenever you make them. And thank you so much again for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
How many different ways do you think I can say the word lube in 30 seconds? Let's give it a shot. Lube. Lube. Lubey, lubey, lubey. Lube. Lurb. L to the U to the B to the E. Lube! Well, that was loads of fun. This phenomenal and very necessary lube break was brought to you by Uberlube. Use promo code SEXEDDB for 10% off your purchase with free shipping at www.uberlube.com. Sex Ed with DB is supported by Clone-A-Willy. Clone-A-Willy has been all about dick since '96, and all kits are hand-assembled in Portland, Oregon. All materials are 100% body safe, extremely high quality, and easy to use and clean. Use promo code SEXED20 for 20% off your purchase of any Clone-A-Willy or Clone-A-Pussy kit at www.cloneawilly.com. Follow them on IG at Clone-A-Willy Kit. Our creator, co-producer, sound engineer, and host is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our co-producer and communications lead is Cathren Cohen. Our main logo and banner graphic were created by Andrea Forgacs. Our social media intern is Leslie Lopez. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Our ad music is by my stepdad, Bill Gant. Thank you so much to our featured guests, partners, and our listeners. If you're interested in advertising with us, email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more Sex Ed content, follow us on Insta at Sex Ed with DB Podcast. Tune in next time.